Welcome, friends. My name is November Lima, and Kaldheim, the new set for Magic the Gathering, is about to drop. So, I'm going to talk about what are going to be the best cards per color for the new standard that'll be surfacing here in a few days. Mainly focusing on standard because that's the format I'm comfortable with. And one thing that I will not be talking about are going to be the lands. Lands all look really good, even the uncommons. Then the rares are going to be your pathways. And then there's the world tree. So all the lands look good. So those I'm not talking about. So what I'm going to tell you in advance is what I think are going to be really good cards in each color. I think they're safe bets. I think they all look really good. I'm trying to avoid the archetypes that I'm not sure if they'll work out yet. Some of them look better for limited. Some might be really good for standard, but we just don't know yet. So I'm going with the cards that just by itself look to have great value. But if you're looking to spend your wild cards smart and efficiently, focus on the lands first because that's where the true value lies. And then after that, you're going to start pick out some of these cards that I'm going to show you. So how I'm going to break it down is I selected 5 cards in each color. So first off, I'm going to be talking about white. White, I think, actually looks really interesting. This set has a lot of really good cards, which is kind of weird to say about white because I know that's a color that a lot of people complain gets left behind. But actually, that's the one I struggled to narrow down the most. So white, then we're going to talk about blue, which has some very strange things going on for it. And some of it you'll see in the cards that I select. Black does what black does, which is basically get a lot of good things out of other people's misery. Black looks really powerful. Probably one of the most broken cards is in black. Red is all about extra mana this set. Then you got green. Green does what green does. That's just abuse mana, get big things on the field. And then I'm talking a little bit about the colorless and multicolored. Narrowed that down to one category of 5 cards as well, which was incredibly difficult because the multicolored have a bunch of sagas coming out. Now, I'm a sucker for sagas anyway, but narrowing it down was very difficult because there's a lot of really good ones. So let's just get started. And first off, I also want to say thank you for sticking with the channel. I haven't uploaded in quite some time, but I'm planning on bringing out more, especially with this set. There's so much cool stuff coming out. So please like the video, subscribe, and look forward to more content. All right, let's get started with white. We're going to jump straight into one of the legendary creature gods. This is Halvar, God of Battle. It's 2, a white and a white for legendary creature god. It's a 4/4. So 4/4/4/4, and it is a modal dual card. So you can flip it for another effect if you'd want to. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. At the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. This is actually really interesting. There's a lot more equipments coming, and auras, runes by example, that are going to impact some of these decks, some of these strategies. Red and white already kind of have the warrior decks going that really want enchantments and want to be powerful with enchantments, equipments. And I think that Halvar is going to add to that strategy. There's going to be some other cards that are going to add to that strategy in the set too. So I think there's going to be more and more potential there to have powerful synergies. This really helps because sometimes you want to be a little bit more cautious with what you equip where, because you want to have it on the right creature, because sometimes just re-equipping, think of Maul of the Skyclaves from the previous set. It costs 3 mana to cast and put it on a creature, but then it costs 4 mana to equip it somewhere else. Being able to do it for free with Halvar really makes you be a lot less cautious and more aggressive with who you equip when, because you can. So I really think that this is going to be an interesting card that is going to be near the top end of some of these aggressive equipment decks. So I'm going to see this in a lot of Boros decks, I imagine. Now, the other side, let's say you already have a Halvar on the board. What's really cool about all these gods in this set is that the other side works really well with the original side. So let's go to the other side. So the other side is Sword of the Realms. So you can cast this instead if you'd want to for 1 and a white. It's legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. Relevant. Whenever a equipped creature dies, return it to its owner's hand with an equip 1 and a white. That is really powerful. So what you can do is you can equip this to another creature if you propose a trade of some kind or whatever that may be, it also kind of gives it protection. So let's say, especially Embercleave, you know that the creature with Embercleave is always going to be the one that's going to get targeted. If it has Sword of the Realms on it, it's going to come back to your hand and you can replay it. So there's some insurance there. Really cool effect. So I think both of these sides are going to be relevant in the Boros aggressive decks or even just a white aggressive deck. So here's the next card, and this is one of the new mechanics as well. So this is Doomscar. It's 3 a white and a white for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. And it has Fortel, 1 a white and a white. So for those who are not familiar with Fortel, it's a mechanic being put into this set. During your turn, you may pay 2 and exile this card from your hand face down. Cast it on a later turn for its Fortel cost. So really interesting mechanic. So what you can do, especially in control decks, this is incredibly relevant. Why is this better than Shatter the Sky? Shatter the Sky allows your opponents to draw a card if they have power 4 or more, but it's also probably only going to cost you 3 mana. Most of the times, unless you're in top deck mode, most of the times you're going to draw this when you don't need it yet, because typically you don't need a board wipe right away, unless you're already in a bad spot. Preventive, what you can do is play this, spend 2 mana early in the game if you draw this, and just let it sit there until you truly need it. You know it's there. Your opponent does not know it's there. They can't discard it. They can't play Agonizing Remorse or Duress or any of that silly stuff to try to get it out of your hand. It's there. It's an exile. It's safe. And when you need it, 1, a white and a white, and you board wipe. That's going to be really good, really relevant in some aggressive decks, or against aggressive decks, and really great in control decks. So like a Doom Foretold deck, by example, that I think is going to be very powerful this coming set. It already was, but it will be even more so. Doomscar is probably going to be the board wipe of choice. Rally the Ranks. A 1 and a white, and this is an enchantment. As Rally the Ranks enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. So this is really going to depend on how good the tribes are. So this is probably the one that I was really fighting between one of the other white cards that I end up excluding out of this list. But then I started thinking about how many creature types share the creature type. And I really think that there's a lot of those that have white in the deck type. So if you think about warriors, humans, I think I saw dwarves will have white as well. There's going to be a lot of creature types that share the white color. So Rally the Ranks for 2 mana, being able to boost them all +1/+1 is going to be really powerful because you can throw it out on turn 2, or if it's later, you only spend 2 mana to get it down. That's a lot better than like the Anthem that's 3 mana for the same effect. However, the Anthem hits all your creatures. So the only downside is you spend 1 less mana, but all your creature types have to match, which I imagine a lot of decks that are going to be more aggressive will do anyway. So that's where this card is going to be very relevant, very powerful. Getting a couple of these down will have a huge impact on the board, and it's going to be harder to deal with because, again, it's an enchantment. Creature mentors are easier to deal with because you can just shoot them down. There's a lot less enchantment removal. Now, a lot of people are going to play enchantment removal because of all the powerful enchantments in this set, but still, it's going to be less than the creature removal. So Rally the Ranks, I think, is going to play a big role in a lot of decks. Righteous Valkyrie. This one is really interesting. 2 and a white for a creature angel cleric, and it's a 2/4. It has flying. Whenever another angel or cleric enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. As long as you have at least 7 life more than your starting life total, creatures you control get +2/+2. That is a lot of stuff for 3 mana. Again, a 2/4 flyer is already pretty decent for 3 mana. Not very aggressive, but it's decent. Why that's actually really good for this card is because this card you don't necessarily have on the board to be aggressive with. You have this card on the board to make all your other stuff more aggressive. Getting to 7 life more than your starting life total, I think is going to be very easy with this. Being able to get life equal to toughness of the creatures you play is going to rack up really, really quickly to get to that 27 life. And if you remember from a couple previous sets, that little pesky 1/1 cleric that once you are at 27 life, you can start tapping it for 4/4 angels. So once you're at the 27 life and you have that on the board also, getting an angel every turn, that will give you 4 life every turn because it is an angel. Your life total is going to shoot up like crazy, and all your stuff is going to get +2/+2. So it's not just about racking up your life, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not a life game player. It's not my thing. Your life total should go from 20 to 0, and that's it. But if the upside of having your life total go up is because all your creatures suddenly get swole, like they all just came back from the gym and they have +2/+2, that is valuable. That is cool. And this is a card I'm definitely looking forward to build around. I really think that you're going to see this a lot on the ladder. I especially expect this in best of 1. I think this is going to be more of a best of 1 deck strategy, because sideboarding, you can be a little bit more aggressive against life gain decks. But it's going to be very, very powerful nonetheless. So I really think that this card is going to definitely make white very relevant, life gain very relevant, and a lot of mono white and Orzhov decks will be taking off with this. All right, we're down to the last white card before I go into the next color. Usher of the Fallen. It's 1 white, so just a white mana, for a creature, Spirit Warrior, and it's a 2/1. It has the Boast ability, so that's coming back. So Boast, for 1 and a white, create a 1/1 human warrior creature token. So Boast is, if you attack with this, you can activate the Boast. So it's not if there's damage dealt or anything like that. So just tap it towards your opponent, and it starts attacking. You pay the 2 mana, the 1 and the white, and you create a 1/1 human warrior creature token. Why did I put this in this list? It doesn't look super impressive at first glance. It's only 1 mana. It's a 1-drop. I think white has a lot of defensive 1-drops. Think of Alsay, think of Selfless Savior, and even the Cleric that's a 1/1. At first, it doesn't impact the board very much. But being able to play this on turn 1 and potentially on turn 2 start swinging for 2 damage, and if you don't have a 2-drop to follow it, you can create a 1/1 token right away. I think that's going to really play a big role. I think every aggressive deck that includes white will want to have 4 copies of this. Unless it's like a tribal that doesn't include like warriors. Spirits is not really a thing in standard, but especially like warriors, I don't really think you want to exclude this card. This card is very powerful, very aggressive, and I think you're going to see 4 copies of this in a lot of decks. So that's why I included this one. All right, let's go to blue. Starting off with a very interesting one. At first, I wasn't sure, and then I started thinking about the potential of this card. Avalanche Collar, 1 and a blue. It's a snow creature, human wizard, so snow is a thing in this set. It's a 1/3, and for 2 mana, target snow land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with hexproof and haste until end of turn. It's still a land. At first, I was thinking like, well, okay, paying 2 mana to get a 4/4 with hexproof and haste, that's great, but it doesn't untap the land, right? So it's not like Nissa, where you have the land, you can tap it to use it, and untap it and use it again. But think of it from an aggressive standpoint. It's 2 mana, but you don't tap the activation. So let's say you have 9 mana on the board. You can create 3 4/4s with hexproof and haste. So your opponent can't play removal on him. If you have this guy on the board and a ton of mana, and you get to upkeep with it, you can start swinging a bunch of lands at your opponent. To me, this is like a Crawling Barrens on steroids. Now, the Crawling Barrens, again, is a little bit more insurance because it stays in your land area, so Avalanche Collar is easier to deal with than a Crawling Barrens. But if Avalanche Collar stays alive, the amount of elemental creatures with hexproof and haste it can start swinging at your opponent is pretty wild. So if you play some snow lands, which I think everybody will do, using this to start swinging lands to your opponent, this is actually a very aggressive card. So I find it very interesting. A lot of potential here. Saw it coming. 1 a blue and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell. Blue, another counter. Woohoo! Of course. Why is this in this list, though? For the Fortel. Look at the Fortel. Fortel, 1 and a blue. So effectively, yes, if you use the Fortel, you're effectively paying 4 mana over the course of time to counter a spell. Does that sound great? Maybe not. But typically a counter sits in your hand for a while. It's not like you draw a counter and it's like, okay, cool, I top deck a counter. I'm going to counter the next thing they play. That's not what you do. You wait until something comes up where it's like, okay, am I going to counter this? I really don't think I want to let this resolve counter. So why this is nice is I can just set it to the side. Again, one of those things where your opponent can't look at your hand. I set it to the side, it's exiled, it's ready to go, and when I need it, I can counter any target spell for only 2 mana. That is wild. The cost of a negate, the cost of an Essence Scatter, I don't have to choose whether or not I want an Essence Scatter or a negate or a Disdainful Stroke. I can play Saw It Coming because it's sitting right there, waiting for me to use it at the right time. That's why it's fantastic. Cosmos Charger. 3 and a blue for a creature horse spirit. It's a 3/3 with flash, flying. Foretelling cards from your hand cost 1 less and can be done on any player's turn. Foretell 2 and a blue. So you can even foretell this card. That is pretty insane. Hey, let's take a second to appreciate this art. Look at that card. That is super cool. Anyway, so why this is interesting and why this is so powerful and why I put this in this list, even though we don't truly know how many people are going to play Foretell hard, I think this makes it very, very appealing to start playing Foretell. Because what you can do is at your opponent's end step, you have mana open, so you can, especially if you have blue mana, people hate blue mana being open because you never know what's going to happen. You play this at their end step if they don't have anything else going on, or you foretell it, whichever you want, because it has flash, so you can foretell it for the 3 mana total. You flash it out, and it's there. Then from that moment on, you can wait to foretell your cards until their turn. So you can leave all your mana open, foretell the cards on their turn, or play stuff on their turn. So you have that flash effect. Think of Simic Flash prior to rotation, where you never knew, is there a Frilled Mystic coming? Is there a Nightpack Ambusher coming? What is happening with all that open mana? Now, Cosmos Charger is basically doing that for all your foretell stuff. And foretelling costs 1 less. That is really relevant too, because you can practically foretell more mana efficiently than just playing it straight out of your hand. Now, also note that this is not a legendary. So you can have multiple Cosmos Chargers on the board. If you have 2 Cosmos Chargers on the board, foretelling is free. So any foretell card you get, you can just put into exile for free. And then you're using them with a reduced cost. That is fantastic. So if you want to play foretell, get Cosmos Charger in your deck, and your opponent is going to be paranoid of all that untapped mana, not knowing what to do. You have all these cards in exile. You have all this mana open. It makes playing very, very stressful. So I think Cosmos Charger is going to be very powerful. It's going to be a pain to play against. And yeah, I think we're going to see this a lot. Ascendant Spirit, another 1-drop in my top 5. It's a 1/1 snow creature spirit. And it is really, really interesting what they did with this card. So for 2 snow mana, Ascendant Spirit becomes a Spirit Warrior with base power and toughness 2/3. For 3 mana, snow, if Ascendant Spirit is a warrior, put a flying counter on it, and it becomes a Spirit Warrior Angel with base power and toughness 4/4. Then for 4 snow mana, if Ascendant Spirit is an angel, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Very interesting build-up. So basically, if you just play this without any kind of cheats, if you will, you're basically playing this for 1 mana. And let's say you don't get anything. Let's say you're further in the game, you're both in top decking mode, or you just don't have the cards in hand that you can really play creatures or whatever, or you're just waiting to counter stuff. Ascendant Spirit comes on, you pay 2, it becomes a 2/3. Then you pay 3, it becomes a 4/4, and then later on you pay 4, and it becomes it gets 2 +1/+1 counters, and it can draw a card if it deals damage. Now, none of these are tap abilities either, so you can just attack with it, and then you can do it on your opponent's end step, or if you have a ton of mana open, snow mana, you can obviously just do multiple in 1 turn. So there's a lot of potential with this to be flexible. Now, let's say you have there's an artifact, I forgot the name, but there's an artifact coming in this set that basically states that all your creatures are all types. So effectively it makes all your stuff changelings, if you will. So then all these already apply, so you don't have to go through the motions of the 2 mana, the 3 mana, the 4 mana. You can instantly choose whichever one you want. So that's really interesting ways to play with this card. There's a lot that you can do with this. Hence why I think you're going to see this a lot. And also, it's a potentially aggressive card in blue that I think is going to see a lot of potential there. Blue has a lot going on with snow, and I think that we're going to have a hard time beating some of those decks, seeing what some of those other cards are that are coming out with it. All right. Mystic Reflection, 1 and a blue for an instant. Choose target non-legendary creature. The next time one or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. Fortel, 1 blue. This is super versatile. Again, blue has a lot of versatility going for it. It's not one-dimensional at all. I think blue is very advanced in this set. Always is, but definitely in this set. Because there's a lot of ways you can use this. You can use this aggressively to play some of your, like, 1 or 2 drops and basically just have this. Use 1 mana, if you foretold it before. Use 1 mana on your biggest creature and suddenly create a legion of massive creatures. Think of like your because it's not non-token, it's non-legendary. Think of your Shark Typhoon. Let's say you have a big shark on the board. You can use this to make a bunch of big sharks. So that's a really cool way to interact with this. You can also target a creature of your opponent or a planeswalker of your opponent, so you can basically effectively copy it by playing something of yourself. Or sorry, not planeswalker, but one of their creatures. But you can also use it defensively. Let's say they have your opponent has a 1/1 dork of some kind on the board, and they play their big creature. Then, or even a Genesis Ultimatum. That's even worse. Think of a Genesis Ultimatum. Your opponent plays Genesis Ultimatum. You use this, and you target their little Llanowar Elf or whatever, or Llanowar Visionary, and suddenly their Terror of the Peaks and their Beanstalk Giant and their Bone Crusher Giant, they all turn into tutus. Now, granted, they draw cards, so maybe that's not the best example, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of potential there. If they have a 1/1 on the board and they follow it up with something that you don't want to deal with, fine. Mystic Reflection, turn into this guy instead. So, or it doesn't even have to be a creature of theirs. It could be a creature of yourself that they copy into. So there's a lot you can use this with. This is a great card to use both aggressively and defensively. And because of that versatility, I think this is going to see a lot of play. This is a great trick card. All right, we're on to black. Blood on the Snow. 4 a black and a black. That's a pretty steep mana cost, but I think it's worth it for the Snow Sorcery. Choose 1. Destroy all creatures or destroy all planeswalkers. Then return a creature or planeswalker card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast a spell. So, in reality, that could go up to 6 mana, because I feel like you're going to play this alongside Snow Basics or Snow Duels. Destroying all creatures, so it's a 6 mana board wipe, which is a little steep, but in reality, if you think about it, it's only 2 mana more than board wipes we're used to so far. And for those extra 2 mana, you have the potential of pulling out a big creature or a big planeswalker that matters back onto the battlefield. And that is why I think this is going to be incredibly relevant. This is not going to be a 4-off. This is not a card you want to have 4-off in your deck. But I can imagine you have like maybe 1 or 2 copies of this, and it's going to make a big impact. Can you imagine that you're playing against this? You finally get a good board state going. You took care of their big creature earlier or their pesky planeswalker, whatever it is. Suddenly your opponent plays this. All your creatures are gone, and they pull their planeswalker back out. That is going to be super hard to deal with, super hard to recover from. That's why I think this is going to be so powerful. Veragoth, Bloodsky Sire. 2 and a black for a legendary creature, Demon Rogue. It has a 2/3 for the stats. It has Death Touch and Boast 1 and a black. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. Whoa. That is incredibly powerful because, again, it's a mentor that puts your card on top, and it activates the moment it attacks. It doesn't even have to do damage. It does not have to do damage. You swing with it. If it gets blocked, that's fine. It trades its Death Touch. But you get the Boast for 2 mana. You get the mentor a card to the top of your library. So unless your opponent plays mill, or even if they do and you followed up with a draw spell right away, you're effectively mentoring a card for 2 mana. Let's say this doesn't die. You get to do it again the next turn. So as long as this creature is on the board and you can attack with it, you get to mentor every turn. That is unreal, super powerful. If your opponent plays this, eliminate, bloodthirst, whatever you got to do, kill this guy. Teragris, God of Fright. 3 a black and a black for a legendary creature god. It's a 4/5 and has menace. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Black has the most broken stuff to set. I think this is the most broken card. Think of this text for a second. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card. So anytime a card leaves their hand, goes into the graveyard, and anytime they sacrifice something. Fabled Passage, Evolving Wilds, nobody plays Evolving Wilds, but those you crack to get a card onto the battlefield. That Fabled Passage can then effectively come to you if you play this card. If you play Doom Foretold, everything they sacrifice can come to you. You don't have to pay mana for it, you don't have to do anything for it. It literally just has to be sacrificed, and it comes on the battlefield under your control. That is unreal. That is so powerful. And this card, alongside a lot of really powerful enchantments, is the main reason why I think that Doom Foretold is going to be unreal, incredibly powerful. If you see this card on the other side of the field, just like the other guy is really annoying, the previous card I talked about, this is on a different level, though. Being able to just take your stuff if you have to sacrifice it, if you get forced to sacrifice, is super powerful. Now, it also has another side. If that wasn't enough, it has another side. So on the other side is an artifact. It's a 3 and a black, Teragris Lantern. Legendary artifact. Tap, for target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. So like I said earlier, these other sides of the god cards work really well with each other. So these cards work very well together. So either they lose 3 life, or they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card, which basically results into you being able to steal that if you have Teragris on the board already. For 3 and a black, you can untap it. So effectively, if you're later in the game and you got some mana, you can tap it, untap it for 4 mana, tap it again. Untap it for 4 mana, perhaps. You can start pinging them for 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. So either they take 3 damage or you take one of their things. That's just stupid powerful. That's why this is probably top 3 set, in my opinion. All right. Burning Rune Demon, 4 a black and a black, another steep mana cost. For a creature Demon Berserker, it's a 6/6. So 6/6 for 6. It has flying. When Burning Rune Demon enters the battlefield, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon that have different names. If you do reveal those cards, an opponent chooses one of them. Put the chosen card into the hand and the other into your graveyard. Then shuffle your library. So for 6 mana, that's a pretty steep cost for a flying 6/6. That practically dies to Heartless Act, I get that. But the fact that it only has to enter the battlefield for you to be able to mentor 2 cards, which one of them goes on the battlefield, the other in the graveyard, or in your hand in the graveyard, sorry, that is super powerful already. Now think of some of the cards that we have in the set already and some of the cards that get played a lot. One that comes to mind is Urion. Urion's in the set. So let's say you play Burning Rune Demon and you have Urion on the set in your deck. You basically play Urion and you get to do it again. Now, if you play multiple Urions, you get to do it several times. So to me, this is a Emergent Ultimatum on steroids. Emergent Ultimatum is good too, don't get me wrong, but it's very different. They're a lot harder to cast. Yes, it goes on the battlefield, but this has a lot more versatility. And again, it's a 6/6 flyer, so there's a lot going on for it here. Also, it's not a legendary. So let's say you have 2 of them in your deck. I wouldn't imagine you have more. But let's say you have 2 in your deck. You have 2 on the battlefield. You Urion. Oh my goodness. The value is unreal. So from that standpoint, I think this card is really powerful. Now, is this going to see a lot of play as the meta develops? I don't know. But I think at first, especially, that's going to be a very strong card. And it just has a lot of value to it. So I feel like it's going to be one of those cards that you kind of see coming and going. But every time you play against it, you're just going to feel bad. Every time you play with it, you're going to feel good. So because of that, I have it in this top 5. Rise of the Dreadmarn. 2 and a black for an instant. Create X 2/2 black zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. Fortel for 1 black. This card took me a little bit to understand how good it was. Sure, like from an insurance standpoint, being able to get 2/2 zombies when your stuff wipes for all your creatures is pretty good. What makes this even more powerful is because of the way it reads. The number of non-token creatures that died this turn. It's not just your creatures. It's not just your opponent's creatures. It's all creatures. So especially in a creature matchup, if you have this and a board wipe, you can effectively take over the game. Now, also from the other standpoint, if you just play a creature-heavy deck with black, so think of like elves by example, you have this as Fortel for insurance. Your opponent doesn't know anything about it. It's there. It's safe. It's only 1 mana for an instant. Your opponent board wipes you, and then at the end of their turn, you can just play this, and all your creatures that died get replaced by 2/2 zombies. I'm sure they're not going to be as powerful as the creatures you had, but still, those are creatures that you can then effectively attack with when it's your turn. So this has a lot of potential, either, again, like I said before, aggressive and defensive. It has ways to be powerful. Whether it is you board wiping and then following it up with a bunch of zombies under your control, or whether it is protecting yourself from a board wipe, there's just ways to use this in a very powerful manner. So that's why I think this is incredibly useful. And just the fact that it foretells for only 1 black. So you pay 2 mana to get it on the board, that's fine. And then whenever you need it, boom, 1 black. It's very easy to keep 1 black open. So this is going to be a big card. And I imagine we're going to see this throughout the entire set, up to rotation. This is just so powerful, so useful. I look forward to playing this. All right, we're up to red. Burgi, God of Storytelling. 2 and a red for a legendary creature god. So far, every color has had their god except for blue, which some people might really like the blue one, but whatever. To me, that one didn't seem as powerful, but maybe I'm wrong. Whenever you cast a spell, add red mana. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. Oh, and it's a 3/3. I forgot that part. I don't even care if it's a 3/3. Because just read that. Whenever you cast a spell, add red mana. And it goes all the way till your end of the turn. That is unreal. Because it's basically like, what was that card? Steamkin. It's a Steamkin, but more powerful. I gotta drink some. It's a Steamkin, but more powerful. Because you don't get capped at that X amount of mana. It just kind of keeps going. So if you play 1 or 2 drops, especially, like you're more aggressive, the amount of stuff you can play with this thing is going to be unreal. So from that standpoint, this card's going to probably be in every deck running red, simply because you can abuse that mana. Also, being able to boast twice is really powerful too, because there are some really, really strong boast abilities, and especially because you're going to have extra mana available throughout your turns, you're going to want to use that. It also has another side, and that's an artifact. Legendary artifact, Harnfell, Horn of Bounty. 4 and a red. Discard a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. So again, great synergy between the two. The one gives you 1 red mana for every spell you cast, and then on this side you have a way to discard a card and then potentially play the top 2 cards of your library. So you can constantly, hopefully constantly, play, discard, play, discard another card if you have it. So you can kind of keep going that way. So I feel like between Harnfell and Burgi, you're going to have a lot of fun ways to just spit out your deck, kind of like you did with Steamkin and Experimental Frenzy. So for the people that have a little bit of PTSD of those times where Experimental Frenzy dropped and Steamkin was on the field and they just started like spewing out their deck at you, we're going to see something similar. Goldspan Dragon, 3 a red and a red for a creature dragon. That's a 4/4. Flying Haste. Those are things I always like to see. Whenever a Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures you control have tap. Sacrifice this artifact, adds 2 mana of any 1 color. Just because this is haste, it is exceptionally powerful. Once you have 5 mana on the board, you play this, it attacks right away, and you create a treasure token that allows you to spend 2 mana of any one color. So effectively reducing the cost of discard by 2 mana, if you think about it. So as long as you have 5 mana, you'll play this, you have 2 mana left at the end of its attack step, or combat step, if you will, that you can use in your next main phase. So that's what makes it so powerful. And every time it attacks, it does that, or it becomes the target of a spell. So let's say you have bump spells, if you will. Infuriate, I don't know if anybody's going to play Infuriate. Anything like that, it's going to start spewing out treasure tokens. Now, I've seen some other cards in the set that create treasure tokens as well. So I feel like there's going to be, if you play this, you're going to play some synergy maybe with some dwarves that do that, where if they attack, treasure tokens get created. And every treasure token translates into 2 mana, so you're going to be able to play something really big really quickly, or just a lot of stuff really quickly. That's why this is so powerful. And basically, on the turn you played, you already get that value out of it. Not just because it's a 4/4 flyer with haste, but because you get 2 mana back right away. We got another god, Torolf, God of Fury. It's 2 a red and a red for a 5/4 legendary creature god. It has trample. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Torolf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. So that is pretty cool, because one of the things that you always kind of struggle with is like, okay, if I have, let's say, a Soul Seer, so 3 mana does 5 damage to target creature. You have a Soul Seer, and you're looking at a Robber of the Rich. I don't want to play a Soul Seer on a Robber of the Rich. That makes no sense. Why would I play a 5 damage spell on a 2/2? But I also don't really want Robber of the Rich to attack, because if it attacks, it might get something from my deck. I don't want that. But now what you can do is you can play Soul Seer on that Robber of the Rich. It takes 2 damage, but you got 3 damage left. That 3 damage can go anywhere else. And it's any target other than a permanent. So that 3 damage doesn't have to go to another creature. It can go to the face. So that's why it's interesting. Soul Seer to Robber of the Rich, 3 damage to your face. Now that is hardcore red. This card is going to be awesome. It also has another side, if it wasn't good enough yet. Thors Hammer. 1 in a red for legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature has 1 in a red, unattached Thors Hammer, and deals 3 damage to any target. Return Thors Hammer to its owner's hand. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary. Equipped for 1 in a red. So again, this works with the other one where you can unattach it for 2 mana, deal 3 damage to something, potentially splitting the damage, and then it goes back to the owner's hands that then can recast it if they need to. So equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary. So obviously you want to put this on a legendary for the damage boost. So again, there's some synergy there. It's great because you can play it, have it on your creature, if it's legendary especially, boost the damage, and then if you need to do damage, you can unattach it and deal 3 damage to something else. It could be any target. So even if you have 2 mana open and you didn't quite yet kill your opponent yet, you can unattach this to do 3 damage. Also, gotta give props to the flavor of this card, because it's Thors Hammer, so very much that Thor vibe of the Viking theme. Obviously, if you look at the art of this version, it's very Thor, very cool. But also like Thor from Marvel, where you basically, what it says you're doing is you're basically chugging your hammer at a target, and then it swings back to the owner's hand. So it's very Thor, very cool. Love the flavor of this card. Frostbite. It's 1 red for a snow instant. This is a common. So again, I have a common in the top 5. Frostbite deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If you control 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 damage instead. The only reason why I'm not like freaking out over this is because it has to go to a target creature or planeswalker, but it's such powerful removal. Because basically what it is, for 1 red mana, you basically have a shock that can only go to creatures or planeswalkers, which is a little restrictive, but still good, because that's honestly what you see shock being used for the most, is creatures with 2 toughness or less. But if you have those 3 snow permanents on field, it deals 3 damage instead. So you effectively have a 1 mana 3 damage spell a little later in the game. That's just very powerful, very efficient, and that's why I think this is a very cool card that is going to see play in a lot of decks that run snow mana and want to run some red removal. Quakebringer, 3, a red and a red. For a creature giant berserker, it's a 5/4. Your opponents can't gain life. At the beginning of your upkeep, Quakebringer deals 2 damage to each opponent. This ability triggers only if Quakebringer is on the battlefield, or if Quakebringer is in your graveyard and you control a giant. Fortel for 2 in red and a red. So, a lot of things that are cool about this. A, it does 2 damage to your opponent each turn without doing anything else. It just has to be on the battlefield, or in your graveyard and you have another giant on the battlefield. Those are pretty cool conditions. It doesn't necessarily have to stay on the battlefield as long as you have it in your graveyard with a giant on the board, which I feel like is going to be pretty easy, especially even if you don't play giants. Every red deck runs Bone Crusher Giant, so you'll at least have that there. It's also not a legendary, so that's why it's even more cuckoo cuckoo if you think about it. You got this. Let's say you have multiple of this. Let's say you have 2. Whether it's on the battlefield, in the graveyard, combination thereof, doesn't matter. Then suddenly, 2 and 2, 4 damage each turn. Bam, bam, bam. And they can't gain life. They can do nothing about it. So they have to either exile this or make sure you don't have giants on the board. That's just very hard to deal with. Sure, the mana cost is steep, but once this is on the board, it's going to start snowballing damage real quick. Also relevant that your opponents can't gain life, because as you saw earlier in the white section, there's going to be some very powerful angels gaining life. So Quakebringer is the anti-angel, and it's going to do a lot of damage. All right, we're down to green, the last color before we go into the multis and the colorless. So bear with me just a little longer, we're almost there. Romewalker, 2 and a green for a creature shapeshifter. It's a 2/3. It is a changeling, so this card can be any creature type. As Realmwalker enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, obviously. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of your library. So for 3 mana in the green color, you can have any kind of creature that you need. So especially in tribes, this is very, very interesting. There's a lot of tribes, and some of them play green. So from that standpoint, very interesting. And then from that standpoint, it's also like the ability is like Conspicuous Snoop in the Goblin deck, if you think about it. Looking at the top card of your library is always relevant because you can start planning. Like, okay, do I want to scry? Do I want to draw? What do I want to do with the top card of my library? What do I need to pay attention to? Can I play this card now? Should I do it later? Having that information of what comes next is huge. Now, especially if that's a creature that fits your creature type, you can start playing those creatures from the top of your deck effectively. So that's going to really tempo up your game. So from that standpoint, I think this card is going to see some pretty good play. Yorn, God of Winter, 2 and a green for a legendary snow creature. It's a god, and it's a 3/3. Whenever Yorn attacks, untap each snow permanent you control. That is pretty unreal. Now, I cheated a little bit because the other side of this is in different colors, so maybe it should have been a multicolor, but this card feels super green to me. There's a lot of mana abuse with this card. So whenever this attacks, now it's a 3/3, so it might die pretty easily, but when it attacks, you can untap each snow permanent you control. That could be all your lands. So you have all your lands are snow permanents, maybe, and you attack with this. Basically, what you want to do is you want to tap all your stuff, play something big or a lot of stuff, attack with Yorn, untap, second main phase, you just spew out your hand. So there's a lot of mana abuse here that is going to be super powerful. I feel like this is going to see a lot of abuse in different kinds of decks. Like, people are going to try and figure out different ways to break this. The other side is very interesting too. Kaldheim the Rhymestaff. It's 1 in blue and a black for a legendary snow artifact. Tap, you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield tapped. So this gives you a little bit of insurance on like Yorn, by example, or some other cards that are snow permanents. You can just play them from your graveyard, and that enters the battlefield tapped is not a big deal if it's on your second main phase. Finn the Fangbearer, 1 in green for legendary creature, human warrior. It's a 1/3. It has Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So, for those that don't remember, it explains it here. A player with 10 or more poison counters loses the game. Really interesting. This is the only card that brings that effect from this entire set. But if you think about it, there's a lot of creatures with Death Touch. in green, and in black. Those are the two colors where you mainly see it. So having this as a potential extra win con for those decks is very interesting. Um, you only have to deal damage with 5 Death Touchers while this is on the board, and you win the game, even if they're little Death Touchers. They can be 1/1s. So I think that because of that, this card's going to be very interesting. It's going to be hard to deal with those decks that play this, especially if you play creature decks. Death Touchers are just a pain in the behind, and this is another reason to play more Death Touchers. So, like, by example, if you have this and Cheville, which is one of my favorite cards, as some of you might know, you're going to swing with your Death Touchers, and your opponent's creatures are just going to have to either kill in the die in the exchange, potentially giving Cheville extra value, or take damage, giving this card extra value. So there's a lot of ways to abuse this card. I don't think this is going to be the most powerful strategy, but I definitely wanted to put it in the top 5 for the potential that's there. Taskibearer of Secrets, 3 and a green for legendary creature Squirrel. This spell can be countered. It's indestructible. Taskibearer of Secret attacks each combat if able. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. It's a 1/1. So 1/1 for 4 is not great, but all those abilities are fantastic. Plus, it's a legendary creature Squirrel. Like, legendary squirrels are pretty dope. Plus, if you look at the art, it's a badass squirrel. Can be countered. That's pretty relevant. There's a lot of counters in standard by now. Indestructible, very cool. Attacking each combat, again, it's a 1/1 that's indestructible, so that it attacks doesn't really matter as a blocker. Meh. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That is super relevant because if you play this, you're probably going to have a creature heavy deck that just flies your opponent. It's not once per turn. It's anytime one of your creatures deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So you could have 3 creatures deal damage, you draw 3 cards. Great way to reload your hand. I think this is going to see play in every green-centered aggressive deck, just to keep reloading your hand. In Search of Greatness, a green and a green enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control without paying its mana cost. If you don't, scry 1. Now, this is not like a, what do you call it, Fires of Invention. It's not like you can just play whatever. It has to keep going up. So, if you have this one doesn't count towards it, but let's say you have a 2-mana permanent, you have to play a 3-mana permanent. If you have a 3-mana permanent, you have to play a 4-mana permanent, and so forth. But once you get to the cap, or once you don't have something to move up, you just scry, so you search your deck for something until you can do it again. And if you reach the max, you probably have something really big on the board, and you're probably winning the game anyway. So from that standpoint, this is a great way to just keep going and building up and get something great on the board in Search of Greatness. All right, we're at the dual-colored ones and the colorless. So I got 5 more cards for you, and then we are at the end of it. The Raven's Warning, 1, a white, and a blue. It's a saga. Again, I love sagas. Turn 1, or Stage 1, if you will. Create a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. You gain 2 life. Okay, cool. Getting a bird on the board, not a big deal. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control with flying deal combat damage to a player this turn, look at that player's hand and draw a card. So even if you have 1 bird on the board or 5, it doesn't matter. You get to see your opponent's hand and you draw a card, which is incredibly relevant. Being able to know what your opponent has, especially in the colors blue-white, probably playing counters, it's very good to know what they have. And you get to draw, which is always nice. Then on the 3rd step, you may put a card you own from outside the game on top of your library. So now you know what they have in their hand. Next turn, you actually get to put something from like your sideboard on the top of your deck. Super cool. Step 1, meh. Step 2 is a great way to prepare for step 3. So especially if you play a Flyers deck, because you really want to be able to look at your opponent's hand. Like, sure, there could be stuff in your sideboard to react to what's already going on, but to be able to predict what they're going to do based on what they have in their hand currently and have something to respond to that is fantastic. So I really think this is going to see a lot of play. Anybody playing blue-white should play this card, period. It is I think, better version of, what's that card, that adventure card that allows you to pull something from your sideboard for 4 mana. Because this gives you the information first. Really great card. Gaia the Inexorable. Inexorable. My goodness, that's a difficult word to pronounce. 3 a white and a black for a legendary planeswalker Gaia. It comes in with 5 loyalty. +1 ability, put a ghost form counter on up to 1 target non-token creature. It gains when this creature dies or is put in exile, return to its owner's hand, and create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. That on its own is great, especially like how annoying is it to build a board state and Ugin just comes and wipes it all out. Now in this case, it would just the creature would come back into your hand and you have a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying on the board. So it effectively replaces it, and you get the card back in your hand to play the next turn. Very good. -3, exile target non-land permanent. Again, super powerful. Sure, it's 5 mana to -3 it. It doesn't kill Kaya, so she's still on the board. And you get to exile target non-land permanent, so it can be an artifact, enchantment, planeswalker, creature, doesn't matter. Very, very strong. -7, you get an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. That is so powerful. And it's really easy to get to if you think about it. You start with 5 loyalty, getting up to 7 is not that big a deal. And then getting that emblem is just unreal. Being able to cast from hand, graveyard, or exile without paying its mana cost. So if you play a lot of legendaries, which you'll want to do if you play this, once you get that emblem out, the game is going to be over because you're just going to be spitting out legendary cards. Because once your opponent deals with it, you can just recast it for free. Insane. Carter's Vicious Return. 2 a black and a red. Another saga. Step 1. You may sacrifice a creature. When you do, Carter's Vicious Return deals 3 damage to any target. Okay, not bad. Each player discards a card on the second step. And on the third step, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until your next turn. That's super juicy. So you can sacrifice a creature that could be something irrelevant, but you don't have to. So you can just ignore that first step if you want to. If you really don't want to deal 3 damage to any target, you don't have to. Discarding is where it gets really interesting because, again, you only paid 4 mana for this saga. Maybe you just put something really big, really powerful in the graveyard. Step 3, you get it back, and it goes on the graveyard with a +1/+1 counter, and it gains haste. So that solves the problem of some of the more heavy costed cards, like that black 6 mana demon I was talking about, or other cards that you just want to kind of cheat in. Massacre Worm is a cool one to put in this way. There's just a lot of ways that you can abuse this. So I think this is a really cool card, even if you don't play sacrifice-oriented decks. If you have some kind of graveyard recursion, Carter's Vicious Return is really cool. Fergusons Retribution. 1 a white, and a black. Another saga. Again, the sagas are very powerful this set. Create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. Cool. So 4 mana, 4/4 flyer with vigilance. Step 2. Until end of turn, angels you control gain tap. Destroy target creature with power less than this creature's power. So again, let's go back to step 1. This creature has vigilance. So turn 2, you can fly at your opponent with your angel, deal 4 damage, then you can tap it to destroy target creature with power less than this creature's power. So anything with a power less than 4, you can kill with that 1 angel. That's assuming that this is your only angel. Maybe you have more angels on the board already. If you do, then suddenly you have just a whole army of tap and start killing a bunch of your opponent's stuff. On 3, angels you control gain double strike until end of turn. So if you have multiple angels, you're going to start swinging for a ton of damage. Probably on step 3, you're just going to kill your opponent. Now, if you only have the 1 angel, it's still powerful because you got a 4/4 double striker. So for 4 mana, you get a 4/4 flyer with vigilance. If it survives until turn 2, you can attack, tap it to destroy something with power less than 4. If it still survives on the 3rd turn, it suddenly can do 8 damage to your opponent. Just a lot of potential there. So even by itself, it's very powerful. With multiple angels, it's super powerful. Why I like this even more, again, Urion is in standard. You can Urion this thing to get more angels on the board. Maybe even repeat step 1 and 2 before you go to step 3. just to get extra angels on the board, get rid of more of your opponent's creatures, and start swinging with double striking angels. This one is probably one of my personal favorites, also because it's in one of my favorite colors. Some of you know Gruul and Golgari are probably my main go-tos. Sarulf, Realm Eater, 1, a black and a green. For a legendary creature wolf, it's a 3/3, so 3/3 for 3. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sarulf, Realm Eater. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Sarulf has one or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. So if you have this and you're going to start like killing a bunch of your opponent's stuff, which in Golgari is very easy to do, you get a bunch of counters on this. Then if it gets to your next upkeep, you can remove those counters. Like let's say you remove 3 counters, everything with mana cost 3 or less goes away. It just dies. Or it gets exiled, sorry. Now this also affects your stuff, so that's something to keep in mind. But this is one of those things where if you play this in a more mid-rangey deck, where you have some maybe higher level planeswalkers on the board also, being able to get rid of like your opponents like Lovestruck Beasts and all that good stuff is pretty dang relevant. So I think this card is gonna be good. It's gonna see play in Golgari, whether it's Golgari counters, mid-range, or like an Abzan build. I think Sarulf is gonna have a role to play for sure. All right, so then I'm to the end of the list. So thank you so much for listening to all the cards that I think are going to be very powerful this set. Kaldheim looks good. This has been the first video I've posted in a very, very long time. Now, I am very active on Twitter, so if you want to see me share my opinion on cards and kind of share deck ideas, I often share deck lists, even though I don't record playing them yet, which I hopefully will do pretty soon. Twitter is the place you can go, so if you are on Twitter, follow me. My name there is November Lima, also very easy to find. Or the @ is my real name, so you can find me on that as well. So I'd love to connect, talk about decks, deck lists, deck ideas. If you want some tips, I can always help you through those. I love building decks. So yeah, give me a follow, and I'd love to connect with you guys. Also, don't forget, like, subscribe. Looking forward to posting more videos soon again. This set looks dope. I love the Viking theme. I love all the cards and all the potential it has. I think this set is a brewer's haven, so looking forward to it, and hopefully see you guys soon in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.